Welcome back to another episode of The Road Chose Me. My name's Dan Grech, and on today's episode, I'm going to run through 5 features or 5 things about the Overland Jeep that I drove around Africa that I'm currently missing and I'm struggling to do without on the Gladiator that I have here now. And so I'm packing up, I'm trying really hard to put everything in their home, turn this thing into a house on wheels. And there's a lot of things about my other Jeep that I guess I didn't really appreciate at the time that I kind of wish I had on this Jeep. And you know, I'm not going to talk about the pop-up roof, for example, because yeah, I don't have one on this vehicle, but that was really a conscious choice. We know that I could have one if I wanted it. So it's not things like that that I'm missing. It's other things, subtle things that I hadn't considered and maybe you haven't considered either. So if you're interested to find out what they are, stick around. Let's get into all the details right now. So I've spent the last couple of days putting everything in its place and filling up the back. I've got a new drawer, I've got the fridge bolted in, lots of things are finding a home. But something I'm really struggling with and something I didn't appreciate is the whole rear access of this vehicle. And as I've said before, I've never had a pickup truck before, so this is all brand new to me. And when I think about my Wrangler that I had in Africa, it had the big swing out door. So you opened it here, it swung this way, and then you had to lift the glass up. And that system wasn't perfect. I didn't really love it. I always pined after a barn door, much like what the Defender 110 has, where you just open the door and the glass comes with it, and that's it, it's all open. Or even maybe a hatchback, more like a 4Runner has, because then once the hatch is open, it gives you a little bit of rain cover. But then of course you don't get anywhere to have your tailgate table like I had in Africa. So kind of pros and cons to those approaches. But I guess I wasn't really aware of how annoying a pickup truck is. Because I've never had one before, I haven't dealt with this. When I'm standing here, this feels a lot like my old Wrangler and I can kind of reach things and it's not too bad. But of course, if I want to get anything out, I open the hatch and this thing is enormous. This is like 2 feet now. And even though I'm 6'2", it's actually really hard for me to reach in and get anything out from the pickup. And immediately I feel like I'm distanced from the vehicle. I'm this much further away from everything. And it just hadn't occurred to me. I just didn't appreciate that. And you can see I've installed this drawer now and it's slowly filling up with junk, which definitely helps to have things come towards me. When my kitchen gets here, it's also going to be on a drawer. So there's no doubt you can kind of negate this or work around this. But rear hatch access, I think, is something I'm going to pay more attention to next time and think heavily about what do you actually have to do to be able to get access to your things in your kitchen and whatever. And I think this is doubly true if I did have some sort of wedge camper on top of this thing, you know, like a Go Fast or an AT Overland camper. I always wonder, how do you even get into those things? Because if you open it like this, you open the rear, then the glass goes up and it would be up here right now. You climb inside, you're gonna have to turn around, reach up, close the glass, and then somehow try and close this. But you're on the inside. So if you do this, your hand's gonna get jammed. So I think obviously there's, you know, compromises and trade-offs all the way around, but the whole rear tailgate on a pickup truck, it's kind of annoying. I don't really like it much. The next thing that I'm missing from my old Wrangler is the overhead storage that I had above the 2 front seats. And this was an optional extra on the Ursa Minor J30 pop-up roof. And they were basically 2 big canvas kind of bags that had mesh on the bottom where you could slide in pens and paperwork and stuff. And then there were big zipper sections. And essentially everything above my head was one huge big zip pocket. And so I found it amazing. I kept my maps up there, handy paperwork, small things that I just never really found a home for. The book I was reading, even my Kindle. And I really loved them because especially in the morning as I was finishing up breakfast or brushing my teeth or whatever, I would kind of walk around and pick up everything that had somehow gotten out of its home for the day and I'd put them up in those pockets. And then I kind of always knew where they were. That's where they lived. And so for me, having those as organization, it really helped, again, make the vehicle feel like it was actually a house and it isn't just sort of like a 4-wheel drive where everything's disorganized and everything's just thrown in wherever it sits. And I have had a good look online. There's one company that makes kind of like a mole panel that goes here in the middle, almost between the two seats, and you could attach bags to it or whatever. And I think that's kind of reasonable works. And I understand why nobody would make the entire thing, because it would remove the access to the freedom panels. You wouldn't be able to use them at all. And so I get it. I'm not the usual Jeeper. I actually don't really care about the freedom panels. If I could have that same storage here and give up my freedom panels, I totally would. So John from Ursa Minor, if you're watching, if you want to make those panels somehow work on a regular hardtop, I think you'd be on for a winner and people would buy it. And in fact, I might take off this insulation piece, I think it's just Velcroed on there, and try and sew up or try and make up my own storage bag, maybe some sort of netting or mesh bag, Velcro it to the roll bars, and try and figure out a way to at least mimic what I had in the J30. Because that convenient storage space, that's definitely what I'm missing right now, and I wish I had it in this vehicle. Another thing that I'm definitely missing from my old Wrangler is the center console that I installed that replaced the factory one. So Tuffy Security, they made a big steel center console that kind of replaced like the rear 2/3 of this whole center section. And actually, you know, its security features were fantastic. I feel like you could pry on that thing or hit it with a sledgehammer for 10 minutes and you still wouldn't get into it. So it was great to know my stuff was safe. But funny enough, that's actually not why I'm missing it, even though that's sort of its main selling feature. The reason I'm missing it is because it was so enormous. It was significantly taller, wider, and longer than the stock center console. And here in the Gladiator, this thing, it kind of has this two-tier system where you get a top shelf, which has enough space for about one granola bar and one pen. Even then, a pen doesn't really fit lengthwise. So it's such a small space, I don't actually understand why you would even want it. And then when you open the other latch, you get access to the whole thing. And the whole thing is just not big enough. So I actually have a smaller camera these days than I took to Africa. And my main big camera barely even fits in here. I have to spend 3 minutes jiggling things until the latch will close. Never mind if I want to have my wallet in there, my GPS, anything else like that. Those things just don't fit along with my camera. So it pretty much means this center console, it isn't really very useful for me. If I could take it out and install a bigger one, I absolutely would. And I've had a really good look online. It looks like for the JL and the Gladiator, Tuffy don't actually make a replacement console. What they do make is a little insert. They either call it an insert or a safe, which is basically a steel box that goes inside the glove box that already exists. So no doubt that would add back the security features, which is great, but it in fact makes it even smaller because you're just putting a box inside of a box. So in that regard, I don't think I want one. I don't think it's going to be very useful. So Tuffy, if you see this or if anyone else out there is thinking about doing it, please make a replacement center console for the JL and the Gladiator that does away with this factory plastic small waste of space nonsense and install a nice big generous center console. That I would buy in a heartbeat, because again, having access to good quality, good size storage while you're up here in the driver's cabin, something that I really loved in the old Jeep and I didn't even know it. Moving around to the back of the Gladiator again, something else I really miss from my old Wrangler is the storage cabinets that I built and installed in the back. And it's funny, I always knew they were great for keeping all my stuff organized, but the fact is, I never actually went camping in that vehicle without those storage cabinets in there. So I didn't know how annoying it was not to have them. And so now you can see I've put a drawer in. Like I said, the kitchen drawer is coming. I'm trying my best to get organized, but it's actually more difficult than I had given it credit for, and it's harder to take advantage of all this space. Obviously, I don't have three-dimensional stacking, so it really is just the length that I could take advantage of right now. And I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, and he's gone from a Wrangler to a 4Runner. He's thinking about a Tacoma or a Gladiator. And we had this really interesting conversation where obviously everybody knows the Gladiator is a bigger vehicle. It has a longer wheelbase, you know, it is a significantly bigger vehicle. And part of the reason I bought it is because it does give me more room for fuel tanks, more room for water tanks. That's a definite, no doubt. I even have a bigger fridge this time. So yes, things can be bigger, that's fantastic. And The quirky thing, or the thing that you want to think about though as an overlander, is yes, it gives you more space, but has it given me more usable space? Is there actually more usable space in this much bigger, longer, heavier vehicle than there was in my four-door Wrangler, which is a vehicle kind of renowned for not being very big? And it's something that I've really been scratching my head about lately. And the answer right now is no. There is less usable space in here than there was in my Wrangler. And a big part of the reason for that right now is because I don't have storage cabinets. I don't have all of that figured out. And so obviously I can work on it. I'm going to improve things. But even at the end of the day, when I do have proper storage in here, does it give me more usable space than my Wrangler did? I'm actually not sure about that, and I'm going to have to really think about it and try to understand as the trip goes on. And I'll definitely update you guys on this and about how I feel. Right now, even though it's a bigger vehicle, I'm not sure it's more usable. The next thing that I miss from my old Wrangler is again up here at the front, and it's again about storage, and it's the under-seat drawers that I had, and I had them under both the passenger seat and the driver's seat. And again, those things were steel lock boxes from Tuffy, super strong, great way to keep my stuff safe. But once again, it's not even the safe factor that I'm missing right now. It's purely the storage. It's purely that where can I tuck things and know that they'll stay where I put them and they're not just going to bounce around endlessly. And so on my driver's side, I had my passport, my money, all my super important documents, even things like the lock nut for the wheels, that's where I kept it. And I knew that's where it would always be. On the passenger side, I had the winch controller and a few things like that. The air hose for the air compressor, kind of the tire gauge, kind of slightly more industrial stuff. But again, it was easy to get at and I knew where it was at all times. Versus on this vehicle, nobody actually makes under-seat drawers for this because it has air vents under there. I guess the heating and cooling for the rear passengers. And I think there's also a bunch of wiring under there and who knows what else for the heated seats, and maybe there's some computer modules and stuff. So there kind of isn't any space for drawers like that on this vehicle. So that means things like the winch controller, I'm kind of just like sliding it under the seat and I'm thinking to myself, that's just going to bounce around and go who knows where and get covered in dust. And you know, the lock nut for the wheels, it's like, do I lock it in the glove box? Do I put it in the center console where there's sort of 30 other things that it's going to be buried under? Things just aren't as easy to organize and they're more inclined to just kind of float around free. So once again, I'm really missing just more organizational space where each thing would have its own place where it actually lives. And I really loved, again, being able to access them from up here when you're in the driver's cabin. Because when you're on the road, you're on the move, most of your day is spent in the front of the vehicle, you're in the driver's cabin. It's kind of a big effort to get out, go around to the back, open up the whole rear section, then open up some cabinet or some cupboard to get something that you just need quickly. Way, way, way better to just have it right up front where you can put your hand on it in 3 seconds flat. So there you have it. That's my list of the top 5 things that I'm currently missing most of all from my old Wrangler. And you might have been surprised, a lot of those things I'm sure are not what you were expecting. Nothing to do with the transmission, the engine power, the 4-wheel drive. All of that stuff is kind of assumed as far as I'm concerned. This is obviously a very capable vehicle. And yes, it does have more power than my other one. So it is really nice to drive, but that doesn't really matter so much when you're trying to turn a vehicle into a house on wheels to live out of. I feel like my new priority system is storage, storage, storage. Where do you put stuff? How do you stop stuff from kind of bouncing around or just being at the bottom of a Tupperware and it's going to be under 19 other things before you can get it out? So I hope this has been helpful, and I really do hope that this helps get you thinking about your vehicle and how you're going to live out of it. If you've got a pickup truck, if you've got a 4-door Wrangler or a 4Runner or something like that, think about where are you going to put stuff and how you're quickly going to put your hands on it so that you can have more enjoyment on the road. Spend less time packing and repacking every day and more time just enjoying your trip, being out doing what we all love. So if it has been helpful, please do hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. I'm actually gearing up because I'm getting on the road again here very shortly. trying to avoid lockdown restrictions. Victoria right now Melbourne is harsh lockdown. The rest of the state is mostly free. Really trying to struggle to understand how I'm ever going to get out of Victoria. Looks like we're going to be in this situation for a while yet. So in the meantime, I'm going to have as many adventures around Victoria as I possibly can, and fingers crossed some other state will take pity on me and the restrictions will relax a little bit, especially for those of us that are double vaccinated, and I might be able to get a window to get into another state. So hopefully that can happen soon. Thanks again to all my supporters on Patreon that are making these videos come true and make it possible for me to bring them to you. So until next time, stay safe out there, and maybe I'll bump into you on the road.